said you worked in Sharps, was that?
Yes, and my father worked for Reed's Corrugated Paper in the paper mill most of his life.
Brilliant.
Over in Alsford, and he worked there most of his life. Lots of family worked there together. He worked hard, my dad. He was raising 5 of us. He was a good dad and he worked hard. Yeah. And me, when I left school, I got employed by Sharps and I worked there for years. And I used to wrap the chocolate toffees on a machine. Yeah, you sort of feed the toffees in and then it gets wrapped and then it goes down to be packed.
I lived in Wheeler Street. Whatever they was doing in Sharps, we could smell at Wheeler Street. I loved working there. At 10 o'clock we was allowed to sing. So we always just sing loud and clear together. Only through the war. When the war ended, no more singing. I've got some good memories and some bad ones. The person who was all scared of was the main friend. She was only an old lady, but she scared us all to death. She used to point at us that we knew we were going to go own up to something. So my 2 sisters worked there. My mother worked there. But my mum used to do the shift work because they used to ask her to go to 7 o'clock until the next day at 7 to 7. This man, he was standing there at the machine. And this machine used to come down like that and cut the squares from the sweets. This day, I was standing there, he come down quick. And he was standing shooting there and he caught his jacket and slapped him in, pushed him in the machine and chopped him into squares. It didn't go right through, so my mum pulled it out quick and got him out. She was covered in blood. She manager said, "Oh, you better go home and change the shirt and come back in an hour." After she saved a man's life, that's all she got was 1 hour and a clean shirt.
Quite a bit was happening because it was 3 floors and you had different departments. You had the mint, you had the chocolate, and then you had making pretty flowers on the ground floor and whatever. Lots of people that are very artistic used to work on the ground floor, and it was so pretty to see them, you know what I mean? They were talented.
I used to weigh Toffees and I loved it. I used to weigh it, put the label up, put your name in, pass it on. Another girl would tape it up, put it on the belt, down to where the glories were. Everyone, you had to sign your name and your number. So if anything went wrong, they come straight back to you. There's no mistaking who did it. You wasn't allowed to have any coat on or nothing in the factory, so there's no slipping things in your coat. Like say I went on to chocolate for and I took one of those sweets, instant dismissal. That's why you had a different colour hat. And you had to have that colour hat, so I knew who it was. You stayed where your hat told you to.
I heard that there were different coloured hats depending on where you went. Is that right?
Mint was green, chocolate was brown, and the ground floor, I think they had blue. And they were a good company to work for, because when you're young, when you're 15 and just start, it's quite daunting, isn't it? But no, they stuck me under their wings and I was okay. And mixing the younger with the elders is good because it gets you to know what it's like when you get older, all the different stages that you go through. But I enjoyed working there. You felt like home, that you fitted, so not too sad. Hey, we used to get sweets once a week on a Friday. All like the seconds they used to sell for the employees, which was nice.
Then Friday night you used to have to buy 1 tin empty, and you used to go buy it. You said 1 empty tin, that meant you wanted to buy an empty tin, which was £1. It was a lovely tin. But I've collected so many tins in there, my mother made me give some away. I've got one that looks like a jewel casket. It's beautiful.
Loads of people employed there, though this is the point. I mean, because really, Maidstone, considering we were quite lucky years ago with all the industries around us.
Tell me about Foster Clark's, for your small time that you were
Well,
there.
it was after I got married, so I only worked there part-time. It was in the canning section, and it was not a very nice job. And you'd go in the morning and you didn't know quite what was going to be waiting for you. It could be beetroot they wanted sorted, it could be fruit, it could be anything. And you had to get your fruit or vegetables and plant. You had a bench and it was water, and you put them in there to cool off so you could handle them. Then you had to rub the skins off and then put them into a top tray, and then they'd be taken away and you'd be counted on how many trays you'd done and paid accordingly.
So what didn't you like about the job?
The fact that you were always in water. You had to wear Wellington boots and all waterproof clothing. And if you were really busy, they were putting pressure on you to speed up. You'd be sweating like a pig. Well, we went in one morning, it was after the bank holiday, and we were told we would be sorting out carrots, and it stank to high heaven. I'm sure they'd all gone off, but we still had to sort them and...
What, can them?
Yeah.
Even though they were...
Yeah, well, I wouldn't have wanted to eat them.
When I was young, I used to live on a farm, and I used to go and dig up old bottles. And I used to find all these Foster Clark's bottles, and they said on them, Eiffel Tower lemonade. Do you remember?
No, never saw any of that, or even remember seeing it in the shops before I went there.
Long gone then.
Yeah.
So when you were there, they were just canning.
Yeah, this was in the 1958. And they used to have a shop where you could buy things at a reduced price. And I never saw it in there either.
Gone off carrots.
So,
It's a reduced price.
Oh, and with the tins of fruit cocktail, you'd have people on the bench putting in one cherry in each tin. One cherry. No, but if you get a tin of fruit cocktail, you'll still only find one cherry in them. No matter what brand you.
Oh, yeah, because they're more expensive than...
Yeah. If you find two, well, someone slipped up. So...
It's like Christmas.
Yeah.
So Turkey Mill stopped producing paper in 1996, and then its heyday under the ownership of the Watman family. James Watman, father and son. And it became the leading mill in Europe. So the watercolourists of the day all wanted the finest paper, and Watman produced the finest paper. And I suppose for about 40 years they were well ahead of anybody else doing something similar. And eventually everything was moved on and it went bust. And when we came, when I and my sort of partners came along bought it in 97, in a way, that was end of nearly 300 years of it being an active paper mill. Of course, paper started off with white rags from London, from East End, and you'd have, these busy ladies stripping the buttons off the rags. And I remember when we were building one building, there was just this huge pile of buttons that had just been thrown away.
I do remember a story from Aylesford times. It was before when our grandfather was working there. I was told it by somebody who I worked with, who used to work down in Kent. So he told me a story about my grandfather. He only had one arm because he lost the other in the First World War. And he had a little dog. And he used to live right next door to the mill in Teapot Lane.
Teapot Lane, yeah.
And so he would go in at all hours of day and night. You never quite knew when he was coming. And he was Colonel Sheldon, and everybody in the mill would signify when he was coming, because they'd all go and flap their arms. So you all knew, here comes Wiggy. Here comes Wiggy.
They're cruel, really.
Well, because you couldn't shout, because we would never be heard, because it was so noisy. And and the dog used to be ahead of him. So that the dog was the first, dog was the warning, and then he would come in. But one day he came in, so you'd have the pulp yard, that's where all the pulp was stored before it then got broken down made into a slurry. And it employed apparently about 24 people in this pulp yard to lift the pulp and put it into the beaters and so on. And he went in one day and he sacked everybody on the spot. All 24 of them got sacked on the spot because of one guy, and I can't remember what the one guy had done. So the whole mill colluded against the colonel, who was in charge, and re-employed them all under different names.
And he didn't realise?
I don't know, maybe he just... Maybe he realised and said, stop it, because you had to actually keep the place working. Yeah. And without anybody in the pulp yard, you were really stuck. Everyone else just went round the back, re-employed them all under a different name, and back they all came again.
Brilliant.
He was quite an autocrat. I think they were so much beholden to the boss too. You didn't argue in those days.
Sack you. Yeah, along with your 23 of your compatriots. Yeah.
But I think also, during the 30s, the big sort of slump,
You're pleased to have a job.
actually Aylesford really grew then under grandfathers, and there was a lot of rebuilding. So I think a lot of people were really grateful for the work.
Yeah. It was a very patriarchal system in those days. You lived and worked for the company.
business. Yeah.
That's all you did.
That was your social life. It was 6 days a week. And
So
on the 7th day, you played sport. That was something that was offered to everybody.
a lot of teams for cricket. Or,
Certainly football.
Yes, any sort of sport.
Grandfather, he was a one-armed golfer. I don't know how he did that.
We only have the memory of Fremlin's in Earl Street and Medway Brewery, which was the Courage one, which had previously been Star and Winch. In walking to and from Maidstone West Station to school, there were beer crates, I remember, on an aerial conveyor, because they wouldn't have been brewing at that date, because I'm talking about later in the 60s. They were actually still just using it as a bottling plant. I don't remember any of the brewing smells or brewing activity, really, apart from that. But it's nice that we've got the continuity, that we have memories of there being brewers in Maidstone. One, because with Phil's memory of picking up the brewer's yeast from Pudding Lane. So we knew that we were recreating a local industry, which isn't why we did it because we love beer. But the location of the brewers in Maidstone is because of the water supply. As with Burton-on-Trent, it's the place that they have the ideal water for brewing. It's wonderful to be continuing a tradition and a traditional industry. Well, what made us do it?
Well, I was made redundant, which helped. We used to enjoy travelling to different parts of the country and trying different beers in different places. And then we started a family, and it was no longer that practicable. And we were brewing at home, and I thought, this is good quality. Why not do it commercially? But in those days, people said, well, you can't do that. And I said, what do you mean you can't do that? There's no law against it, is there? Everybody thought there was. But no, there's not. It has to be done legally. You have to pay your excise duty and all that jazz. And all we needed was premises. And we happened to find Hale Mill.
At the time, we lived in Hale Mill cottages,
Yes,
so it was on our doorstep that we found very small premises and beautiful premises in the sense of the setting in the Lewes Valley, in the old handmade paper mill. It was wonderful. There was somebody in the cycling group that we used to belong to, and I'm sure that he said he worked at Fremlin's. That Phil said, oh yes, I remember him. It was Les, and yes, and the bell it rang with you was...
As he said, after a bottle of Issuer's Blue Label, the sun would shine and all the women would be beautiful. And I thought, that's the best description of beer I've ever come across.
Again, the connection with Fremlin's, our brewer is very keen on going around the country, trying different beers, but also a good memory of local beers. And when he was suggesting that we brew a certain beer, he said, this is going to be like Fremlin's 3-Star, because it's something that when you talk to people in pubs who are of a certain age, they can remember drinking. Their faces light up. Yes, I remember drinking that. And, it's something that really conjures up a real delight in them. And they say, and we like your beers because they're similar or they're no-nonsense beers. When Phil had the initial ideas for our logo, it was based on the traditional brewer's bottle label and the oval with the writing round the outside, and Phil envisaged a scroll across the centre with barley ears and the script around. But for the centre of the logo, we knew that the original seal of Maidstone was a lady standing on a stone with a stone in her hand, and we had seen that on a seal in Maidstone Museum. It's the original seal of the corporation, dated 1567, and it's a rather crude representation of a rather unattractive lady with knobbly knees. Because we were at Hale Mill, where there were a lot of artists visiting, it was recommended that we go to Graham Evenden and ask him whether he would reproduce the lady, but in an artistic form, which turned out to be a bit like Venus rising from the waves, but a very attractive representation of the lady who had been the maid of Maidstone on the seal.
The ingredients we buy locally are hops, and we still only buy Kentish hops. And everybody says, oh, can you still get Kentish hops? Well, the answer is yes, you can. From coming to Kent, it's where I first encountered hops being grown. And we used to cycle a lot as well, and we cycled down the Weald, and the smell of hops being dried at picking time was also overwhelming. Gorgeous smell.
And I lived at East Farley when we first moved to Kent in 1966, and there were hops growing in the field opposite, and we could see the hops being harvested and taken along the road to the oast houses, and so could actually see it all sort of happening around us. The one thing we insist on is using Kent hops. It goes back to our image of ourselves as traditional brewers, but on a very small scale, continuing traditional real ales. We're very lucky that we've got a son who's prepared to come into the brewery and is going to be running it as we retire even further than we are currently retired.
It was the best thing ever when one of our family continued the brewing process. And that's really us looking to the future. And we would hope he would continue to brew with the same, do we have ethics? Ethos, that's the word you have, isn't it?
He is very, very committed and very keen to continue in the way that we've started, not to go off on a different path, but to continue very much what we've started, which is wonderful for us. And it's not driven by cost, it's driven by the quality we want to be there. And we know that Howard is very committed to keeping that going for the future.
It's nice to feel that I can be the second generation of something that Mum and Dad have started, and if I would like to hope that in another 40 years that maybe I've got something that can then become a third generation brewery. Let's hope.
Howard's wife works in the brewery as well. It would be lovely to think that their daughter would also then be continuing as a brewster into the future.
A brewster.
And there are ladies in brewing now, perhaps more than there have been for many years since the traditional alewife of medieval times.
Ooh.
It's a very big thing. So if there is a Goacher female brewer in the future, then that would be splendid.